Today it's Afghanistan, tomorrow maybe Iran or Pakistan. The dogs bark, the caravan moves on. But almost a decade ago, it was the war in Kosovo, the largely Albanian enclave, whose demands for freedom triggered war with Serbia. There were notorious atrocities perpetrated by Serb forces, engendering sympathy for their Albanian victims. But that isn't the complete picture. Disturbing evidence has now emerged about kidnapping, murder and even organ theft in the dark days after the war. Nick Thorpe reports.
Kosovo turns a fresh face to the future, Europe's youngest and most controversial state. The path to independence has not been easy for this tiny, star-shaped land trapped between Serbia and Albania. From 1998 to 1999, the ethnic Albanian Kosovo Liberation Army fought a bitter guerrilla war against the Serb police and army. The price paid by Albanian civilians was enormous. Villages were surrounded and shelled. Thousands died. And 800,000 Albanians were expelled, not simply from their homes, but from their homeland. NATO forces intervened to stop the ethnic cleansing and forced the Serb military out of Kosovo. They left in fury a land they regarded as their own. And the tables turned. As NATO peacekeepers struggled to establish order, Albanians sought revenge. A period of terror for the remaining Serb civilians. Brankica Antic was one of those Serbs whose family fled Kosovo to escape the violence. She has returned to her native Prizren for the first time in 10 years to talk to us about her husband Zlatko. She says he was abducted by Kosovo Liberation Army soldiers after the war.
We always light candles for their health and well-being, and we will continue to do so unless and until their bodies are found and we know for a fact that they are gone. He will always be alive for me until his body is found and we know for a fact that he is dead. This is not only for my husband, but for all the families of the kidnapped and missing persons.
So where were Zlatko and all the others taken? One former detainee said that some captives were kept in this village, in shacks behind the houses. Kosovo was swarming with NATO peacekeepers. They passed within meters, while their guards smiled and waved. The detainees were too scared to cry out. After the war, our sources say, dozens of people rounded up by the KLA were driven across this border from Kosovo into Albania. At the same time, hundreds of thousands of refugees were coming home in the other direction. And NATO soldiers at the border didn't notice. The following account was given by a former KLA driver about his own role in the crimes he describes. It was made available to UN investigators. We have the original recording, but the translation of his words is read by an actor, because his safety, like other sources in this film, is at risk.
They told me I had to transport some people to Albania. There were 3 men, prisoners, all civilians. Based on what they were wearing, they looked like villagers. Their hands were tied behind their backs, and they were fastened to the inside of the van. 3 Kosovar Albanians were riding in the car in front of us. There were 2 others with guns riding in the back. It was dusk when we left.
Some of those abducted were taken across the border from Prizren in Kosovo to Kukes. The town was a key supply base for the Kosovo Liberation Army during the war. Prisoners were also held here. Few who survived dared to tell the tale, but this man did. His testimony makes clear that prisoners of different ethnicities, including Serbs, were transported from Kosovo into Albania. We have disguised his voice.
They ill-treated people in the corridor. They also came into the rooms in groups of 5 or 6 to question us. And they used knives, guns and automatic rifles. They did things to us that you wouldn't even do to animals.
How do you know there were Serbs there as well?
I know the language well. When a person is ill-treated and screams, he cries out, "Oh, mother," in his own language.
This is the factory, the former KLA camp where we believe the prisoners were kept. 10 years on, the gates he describes are still the same. And just through there, I can make out the iron bars on the windows where he says he was shackled.
You know, this is where our source came.
These stories of kidnapping and murder were first discovered by the American journalist Michael Montgomery.
Many of the men we interviewed were in the KLA, and to this day, many of them still believe in the cause, that is, their cause of independence from Serbia. But they also say that there was an underside of that war, of their war, and an underside to the men who were fighting the war, which was not about independence. It was about other things. It was about revenge, it was about killings, it was about greed.
One of the victims was buried here. There are probably others.
This was very difficult to get this kind of information. The men who knew about it were very reticent about talking. But when we did start developing a picture, when a picture started emerging of these camps, of the detentions, of the beatings and the killings, we eventually decided to go to the people whose job it was to find these missing, and that is the UN Office of Missing Persons in Kosovo.